Hello, my name is Father Edward Looney, and you're listening to the podcast How They Love Mary, a podcast that I hope will either be the beginning or the deepening of your Marian devotion. One of the great Marian prayers that we have, in addition to the Rosary and other scripted prayers, is the Litany of Loretto. And the Litany of Loretto goes through lots of different titles of Our Lady in which we invoke her intercession under those titles. And each title usually has a little history behind it, a very beautiful prayer. So I encourage people to pray it, but also then to learn more about these titles, especially those that kind of might resonate with you, that speak to you. And today, I'm very excited to be speaking with Dr. Gerry Crete, who is a marriage and family therapist and professional counselor specializing in the treatment of trauma and addictions, as well as marriage counseling. He is also the co-founder of Souls and Hearts, which is an online platform providing mental health education to Catholics through courses. So he has written a new book with Sophia Institute Press called Litany of the Heart. And today he's here to discuss that topic with us. So thanks so much, Dr. Gerry, for joining me today.
Pleasure to be here.
And let's just maybe talk a little bit about your background. So, you have a PhD, you are a marriage and family therapist, you focus on mental health. So, how do you integrate your Catholic faith and beliefs in your practice then? Of course, it manifested itself through this mental health platform you have, Souls and Hearts. But yeah, how does your faith inform, I guess, everything you do in terms of your profession?
Yes, yes. Well, I also have a private practice called Transfiguration Counseling, and we're a group practice of Catholic therapists. And so I primarily work with Catholic clients, and we work out of various parishes. So the number one thing would simply be, first of all, that we provide counseling that for people who want to know that their therapist or their counselor really understands their faith and respects their faith. And so we're never going to, suggest a divorce or abortion or anything contrary to the faith. And so first of all, there's just that context. But I'm also really blessed because when the clients are interested in this, I can bring to bear our spiritual resources, including Our Lady when appropriate, in through the therapeutic process. And a lot of the therapeutic work I do is experiential. And so we try to bring prayer into it and allow those spiritual resources to have a place within the total healing of the person.
Yeah, and there's so speaking of your book, Litanies of the Heart, and I'm sure as a doctor, then as a counselor, you kind of you see the movement of people's hearts and kind of what's causing them trouble, and I'm sure that kind of informs then this book that you have written. But maybe just to set the scene before moving in there, there's this Instagram account, and sometimes they create litanies, and I think they're very beautiful litanies that they've crafted. Litanies are special because they have little mantras. So, with the Litany of Loretto, we say, pray for us. Or, with the Litany of Humility, we say, Jesus, grant me the grace to desire it. So there's kind of a main statement, a versicle, then there's the response. And that's, we're praying for that versicle to really be our response and really to be ingrained within our heart. I'm just curious, are there any litanies that have been very significant in your own devotional life, saints or to the Lord or to the Blessed Mother?
Yes, yeah. For me, a litany to the Sacred Heart has been very influential. I love that litany. Um, Litany of the saints in general. I love. So I've always been very fond of litanies. And I had a wonderful book by Tan Books that had, like, I don't know how many hundreds of litanies in it, both for public and private devotion. So I've always been fascinated with them. And I worked for another Catholic practice in the past, named after the Holy Family, and I wrote a litany to the Holy Family for the practice, basically for therapists to pray. And so, and I enjoy poetry, I enjoy writing, and so when the idea came to write these particular litanies, I was just on fire about it. I was really excited to approach them.
Yeah. So, what inspired you then to put pen to paper metaphorically? Of course, it's fingers to keyboards. But how do you come about saying, I want to write this book?
hmm Well, I work, as you mentioned, with Souls and Hearts, which is this online platform with we have courses and podcasts and various online resources. And my partner is Dr. Peter Malinowski, who's a psychologist in Indiana, and he was talking about how cool it would be to have a litanies for our website, and because he liked that idea, and I said I've written litanies before, and then I was sitting with that idea, and what came to me was how can we bring in some aspect of psychology, appropriate psychology, to bear in our faith. And what came to me was the attachment theory. And if you or any of the listeners don't know, attachment theory is an amazing approach to understanding the person and understanding human development, that from a young age, a child, a baby bonds with a mother, right, without even words. And that attachment is so necessary for human growth and development. And that through your life, you grow and create secure and safe attachments. And that fosters all sorts of positive relational, positive emotional being and all this. And so I was thinking, how can we help people come to know Jesus as our secure attachment figure, the ultimate secure attachment figure? And so, in attachment theory, there are different insecure attachment styles that people adopt when because of course we're human, we're in a fallen world. As we grow up, our parents or other caregivers can, they may not mean to, but can fail us, or we can develop insecure attachment. So we can be avoidant, or we can be reactive, or we can have some combination. And so I identified like three types of insecure attachment. And so I identified them with three different ways in which the heart is predisposed toward God. And one is that, and so one of the litanies is called the litany of the closed heart. And so that is where the person is avoidant, right? Avoids God, avoids others. Then there's a litany of the wounded heart. And that's where the person is possibly very anxious, there's a lot of hurt. And so you're anxious around other people. And then there's the litany of the fearful heart. And that is where the person is they go between being avoidant and being anxious with others and with God ultimately. So each prayer is designed it begins with the insecure place that we've all been in. We've all been avoidant. We've all been reactive at different times. And it starts with the place of insecurity. And as the litany moves on, you grow into a deeper connection with God. And so, like you were saying, the responses do change to eventually, like, where it's a crying out to God to listen. And then at the end, it's like, hold me, be with me. And so the litany moves you from insecurity to security.
Yeah, I like that notion of hold me. I think sometimes you see this, and maybe artwork helps us to identify with, put ourselves in that place. But you see that tender holding of Jesus, of someone, whether it's the sinner that comes back, or even you could draw on the scriptures and you can see how Jesus held these people and brought them to a place of hope that if their hearts were closed or if they were anxious, that he brought them to a place where they were open and less afraid. So yeah, that's definitely a beautiful image, even not just words, but the image of Jesus holding me as well, to pray with that.
Yes, absolutely. And so we have the litanies, and they're available on the soulsandhearts.com website, that you can just download them. You can also order them. We have these nice little, trifold little glossy litanies that people can order. And we're just asking for people to pay for shipping and the basic cost of it. But you can also just download them. And we have audio versions as well. So if you're praying, because it's nice to pray a litany with somebody. You can do that by yourself, but so if you want to pray along with the audio version, both in English and in Spanish, it's all there. So we made these litanies, and they've gained some popularity. Many people pray them and love them. And then that led me to think about expanding it into this book. And so what the book is all about is really helping people who've experienced trauma, which is all of us, and who've experienced anxiety in their lives, which I think is all of us. And some of us have had, have more severe trauma, more severe disorder, but everyone has experienced some level of it. And so the book goes through the process of understanding and healing and working with the part, I would say, call it the parts of our self system. So that's a psychological approach that's secular, called internal family systems, and ego state therapy are two different approaches that look at the parts of the self system. And so as I was, and I love this approach. I've been using it. It's been powerful with clients, but I've been asking myself, well, what about the Catholic philosophy behind this? What about the anthropology? Is this sound? And so that led me into this whole exploration in terms of, searching through the biblical texts, searching through the saints, various saints, to understand, is the idea that we have a core or an inmost self and multiple parts within us, within our soul, is that sound from a Catholic perspective? And so the book attempts to really flesh that out, and how in fact it is. But how you have to adapt the secular approaches to be in line with the church's teachings and the biblical approach. And so that is what the book is all about.
I think we often hear about the wounded heart. Henry Nouwen wrote that book, The Wounded Healer. When spiritual directors these days are meeting with spiritual directees, they often will talk about wounded hearts. And for a lot of people, they might have a father wound. So the father was absent in their life. Maybe their father was abusive, manipulative. Maybe there's a mother wound that maybe their mother didn't love them as our experience of mothers, or what we perceive the experience of a mother loving their child should be. So I actually would say I have both those wounds, right? So my father was absent, they separated before I was born. So there is that absent father wound in my heart, and not having been loved or appreciated by a father figure like that. Of course, other people kind of take that role, then you identify, and at different stages in your life. Somebody, maybe a youth minister or the parish priest, was a good father figure. Now, there's two individuals. They've taken me hunting and fishing. They've taught me all this stuff that I never had as a kid. So they've kind of become replacement fathers. My mother was a single mother then. She worked two jobs. My grandmother pretty much raised me, even though we all lived in the same home. But a lot of people will often ask me, they'll say, well, Father, when did your devotion to Our Lady begin? And
Mm.
I often will tell them, I think it's because of the lack of maternal love I experienced from my mother, that when I heard the story of Our Lady and her messages and apparitions, when I learned about her, I realized, well, she can make up for what was lacking, and that love that I didn't have, that maternal affection. So I think that's why I gravitated towards a love of Mary and all things Marian. So maybe could you just share a little bit about the wounded heart? And we often hear this, preachers like talking about this at times, maybe like Trinity Sunday or something like that. But like how sometimes when we approach God the Father, that our relationship with our father might affect that. So if I have that wounded relationship with my father, I might not be able to relate that much to God as Father. So how do you see the wounded heart in relationship to the Trinity? But even then, just as I shared, kind of the wounded heart in terms of a mother, I turn to Our Lady. So could you speak a little bit about kind of the spiritualization of the wounded heart?
Yes, absolutely. Well, one way that we look at this from internal family systems or ego state therapy approach is to understand that we have a part of ourselves that at some point in our development was in fact wounded, right? Like you were saying, like maybe it's an absent father, maybe it was an abusive parent, maybe it was a whatnot, some kind of wound happened. And the approach there is to understand that at that time, let's say you were 10, that there's almost like a part of you that is frozen at 10 that never got what that 10-year-old needed, right? Maybe dad disappeared or something like this, and so that 10-year-old is still searching for a father to love him and to affirm him and to want to spend time with him. And so there's a sense in which there's a part of us that is still 10, Sometimes you hear about like an inner child, that kind of thing. And so the 10-year-old is kind of there still. And so even though you might be 20 or 30 or 40 or whatnot, there's a 10-year-old part that can sometimes show up, right? And we're not fully conscious of it, and it's influencing our emotions. Maybe we're triggered, like we have a response, like that maybe doesn't completely make sense to our adult self, right? Why am I emotional right now? Or why am I angry? Or why am I feeling hurt? And it's that 10-year-old part. And so what the approach that we take here is we want to connect with that wounded heart, or that 10-year-old's part, for example. We want to give that part whatever he needs, that he always needed. And as an adult, it can't be mom or dad. And to some extent, it could be somebody. It might be that someone else, right? Like you were saying, like a priest or a coach or somebody has helped with that and to help heal that wound. But it may not be complete. It's never going to be completely healed except through God. And so ultimately what we're wanting to do there is to bring I would say inmost self, our core self, and with the graces received through Christ, to love and heal this wounded part. And in the book, I have a little vignette at the beginning of every chapter. It's just a little short thing that is kind of like what you were describing, like a little example of somebody being hurt by their parent or some experience. And then I walk through the psychology of it, the scripture of it, and then an experiential prayer or meditation to help bring the person into that connection for healing to happen. And if it's all right, I'll give one example. There was one, it wasn't a child wound, but although this person had other child traumas, but one of the vignettes in the book is about a woman who had a traumatic birth experience. Like she was pregnant and she gave birth, but she felt like the nurses were cold. She felt like it was clinical, and she didn't feel cared for, and she was in distress, and no one cared. And she gave birth to this baby. She had to be put out, and she didn't remember, and she was upset because she wanted a natural birth. And so, and then when they brought the baby to her, she felt like she felt psychologically in some way like, is this really my baby? I don't even feel connected. And so we're working therapeutically with her. And in this approach of internal family systems, when we're connecting with her and the part of her that was in so much distress and so much, and so as we're entering into it, the process, I won't get into the therapeutic process completely, but there's a point where we're able to invite, or notice anything, basically God's presence. And this lady had a very deep devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then in the process of the therapy, she said, because we're encountering her in the moment when she was coming into the labor room, and she was there, and she was starting to feel distress. And then she said, I experienced Our Lady of Guadalupe showing up. And in fact, there was Our Lady was there comforting her. There was Our Lady was there delivering the baby. Our Lady was there. And through this therapeutic experience, and I would say prayer experience, she was able to reconnect with her baby. And and I see it as Our Lady's grace worked in that moment. So I just felt, as a therapist, like so blessed and privileged to be doing this work in a Catholic context, so unlike I could do in another context. So that's an example.
Wow, yeah, that's definitely incredible. And for her to experience, really, that's the maternal presence of Our Lady, and to see Our Lady of Guadalupe, who says, am I here who am not your mother? I am your mother. And so here I am with you. And she's with her suffering children. And so that's very beautiful that's how it all kind of uh went on for her, and how she experienced the grace of healing, and was able to move forward with Our Lady towards healing. I think we often talk a lot about our wounded hearts, but I think maybe something we don't necessarily speak about, because it means that we even have to do further introspection than just noticing the wound personally. But I think sometimes we are the wounders. So sometimes we inflict the wound upon someone else. And
Mhm.
there's this one memory of mine that I know that I was the wounder, that I said something very hurtful to a person, and it's bothered me ever since. I know how badly and deeply it hurt that person, And so like I've prayed personally that the Lord would heal that person's hurt and wound. I've reached out a few times. Actually, we kind of reconciled. Obviously there's no friendship there, but there's some sort of closure at least with it. But a person, if I see their Facebook posts or whatever, I'm like, that's a person I hurt. That's a person who needs my prayer. So, how do we work through the fact that maybe someone else's heart is wounded because of
Mhm.
us?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, brings out so much that I could say on that. It's so great question. First, I would say this. I've been exploring a little Thomistic philosophy and to really understand this and the complexity of our inner world. And St. Thomas talks about having to love oneself properly before you can truly love others or even God ultimately. And so really got me thinking, what does it mean to love yourself? Because when I have a part of me that is reactive and possibly could harm or hurt somebody else, maybe with words or behaviors of some kind, maybe it's even an addictive behavior that then harms other people, or like your example of something you said, um, it really is about a part of ourselves, usually, that is afraid of something and is trying to protect us in some way, right? So I don't know the exact example, but maybe somebody said something or did something and it triggered us, and we felt like we had to protect ourselves. So I always look at, all right, when that part of you was being reactive to somebody else, what was the real motivation there? And I'm not saying it was a healthy response at all, but what was the motivation? Because it might have been some perception that I have to protect or something. And so if you can connect with yourself, love yourself enough to actually explore that and ask, the way I look at it is asking the part of yourself, like, what, when you, the idea of not responding negatively, like whatever, not having a sharp tongue or not being critical or something, what were you afraid would happen if you didn't take that harsh tone? Ooh, what was I afraid of? Maybe I was afraid that they would think something about me, or they would, think I was weak, or take, they might try to take advantage of me. Who knows, right? And so whatever it is, you go, okay, so your intention, my intention, really, it's part of me. The intention was to do something protective and good, but you did it in a way that was actually harmful to yourself as well as to this other person. So loving me would mean, okay, how can I still protect myself if there's a need without harming others and without harming myself? And so it's the therapy there would be to explore that and to figure that out and work with the part and figure out, well, what is there a burden that this part of me is carrying, right? That makes me want to be so defensive or makes me want to be so critical of others. What is that burden? And can I work with myself to relieve myself of that burden, so that I'm freed up to not have to be harsh or critical or whatever it was. Does that make sense a little bit? Or
Yeah, definitely. So when you're raising these questions, like what was it in me that I reacted that way? Is that something you recommend someone maybe take to a holy hour, to prayer before the Blessed Sacrament?
Mhm.
How are they answering that question? What context?
Yeah, so of course I'm doing it with people in therapy. So in the therapeutic context, I'm helping people get to know and love the parts of their self system, right? So we have like there's a part of me that's a doer, right? The manager. I take care of life. I figure out, I do tasks, I take care of things, I'm busy, right? And that's great. We all need a Martha part, right? And then I have another part that I know I have some wounded parts too, right? That have had to experience a lot of healing. So I have those. And I have, but sometimes we have a part, and in internal family systems we call them firefighters, but they're really protectors in the sense that they leap in to prevent us from feeling shame, from feeling fear, or from feeling pain. And so they leap in, and all they care about, like a firefighter, is like, let's get this fire out. Let's handle this and manage it. And they don't really care about your house, like your drapes or your door or your carpet. They're just going to come in and do what they have to do to make the pain go away. So those parts, some of them can be like an addiction, right? So for some people, it might be alcohol, drugs, or some other thing that is addiction. Or sometimes it can be that critical or harsh or something. But usually, those parts of our system don't really care about what other people think in that moment. Whereas I have other parts of me, the doer, the one that's the therapist part of me, or the that really do care what other people think. And so I have this internal battle going on, possibly between these different parts, and they're all trying to protect me from various pains and shame and all this. And I think that's what St. Paul talks about when he says, "I do what I do not want to do," or what St. James talks about is this war within, right? And so I think that's really like our internal battle, and what we're wanting to do is connect with our own parts. And so I often ask people in between sessions, yeah, to go and sit in adoration, do a holy hour and sit in adoration, and just try to connect with all these different parts of you, inside of you. Get to know your interior world, and jot down, if you can, like maybe you want to just jot down what you notice, or some people draw them. Some people see their parts, like they close their eyes and they can actually picture their parts, but some people can't, and they just sort of sense the presence. But either way, you can draw it, you can write it down, but you're just sort of getting to know your interior world. And I find people, it's amazing what happens, because when all your various parts are loved and understood and helped, and they're connected with your, St. Paul calls it the inmost self, and they're connected with that core spiritual center, it's unbelievable how the human person experiences that integration. They experience that unity within. um it's just amazing how much better people feel, how much better they're able to pray, how much better they're able to relate to other people, how much happier they are. It's phenomenal.
And what's the role of the sacrament? So let's look at like the sacrament of reconciliation, penance. That obviously is a sacrament for the heart. It's a sacrament for opening our heart to receive God's graces, to receive that forgiveness. So have you seen the sacrament of reconciliation powerfully at work in the lives of some of your clients?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an interesting thing, right? Because when I talk about parts, sometimes people are like, blame the part. Yeah, it's not really totally me. It's just this part that ran out and, had this affair or did this thing. And I'm like, okay, no, you can't do that. It's the whole human person that wills and makes the choice, including their self and all their parts. So it's a whole human person. And so, but we bring our parts, right? Even our wounded parts, or our addictive parts, or our troubled parts. We bring them with us, right, into the sacraments. I see that obviously reconciliation is so profound. I would even encourage people to say, there's a part of me that really struggled with this, and and another part of me feels really shame about it. So like, the multidimensional aspect of the person being able to bring that into the sacrament and receive absolution, the whole person, all the parts, the self, all receive. And I even talk about, can you bring the part of you that you don't like? Maybe you don't like that child part, that was that 10-year-old for some reason, and we'll work on that. But can you bring that part of you to communion? Can you bring the part of you, yes, maybe obviously after receiving absolution, but can you bring that part of you that you might sometimes not like? Can you bring that to communion, so that all of you is receiving our Lord?
You mentioned this threefold movement in your book, looking at
Mhm.
the closed heart, looking then at uh, the wounded heart, and then the anxious heart. So, do you see that as a movement? Like maybe someone is very closed hearted at first, then God opens their heart, and then they explore their wounds, and then maybe they see their woundedness and they have all of this anxiety. Are the three hearts connected in some way, or do you view them as different aspects of the hearts?
Yeah, I would view them as three different parts of the person's self system. So, but I mean, it's not. You could have various parts of the self, more than one, that's wounded in different ways, and so on. So I would see them as connected. And when all of your parts receive whatever healing they need, so if an anxious part receives that sense of security and calm and peace in Christ, and the wounded heart is able to receive, the affirmation and the love and so on. So then those three parts, let's say, are in harmony with each other, with the whole person. And there's just a sense, I kind of see it like, like an orchestra playing in harmony. Like all of a sudden, they're different. You've got tubas and you've got wind and string instruments and various things, and but they're playing in harmony. And what you discover is that each of those parts has an important function for the whole person. It's like the body of Christ. Like St. Paul talks about each body part in the body of Christ having an important role, right? And in the same way, and within our system, we have different parts that have important roles. They're distinct. They're not ontologically separate beings or anything. They're just aspects of the self, but they're distinct and beautiful in their own ways.
One of the things that I like about litanies, one of the things I like about these litanies you're referencing is that I think a lot of times in our prayer, we just need to be direct. We need to name these things. We need to ask God for the grace that, Jesus says, ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find. So I should ask for the grace of healing. I should ask for God to open my heart. I should ask God to heal my wounded heart, ask for peace. And so that's really, in the little mantras that we respond to a different petition in the litany. Well, that's us asking, that's us knocking on the door of heaven, asking the Lord to do these things. And that's really, I think, your hope is that as people make their way through litanies of the heart, that they will experience a profound change of heart. That, as I think it's Ezekiel that says that the Lord will take away our stony hearts and will give us new hearts. And
Mhm.
that's really what we want the Lord to do, is to give us a new heart, to give us a loving heart. And is that your hope for Litanies of the Heart, or what's your hope as someone picks up the book and reads and prays with it?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I would see, yeah, to have a new heart, I would say that all the burdens on the heart are lifted and relieved. And so all of the parts of the person are able to kind of sing in unison. And there's a sense of integrity and unity for that person. St. Thomas calls it self-governance, which sounds a little clinical or something, but it really is like self-friendship. Like you're is this loving relationship in your heart. And so then when you feel that unity, when all of your parts and their burdens are lifted, then you're freed up to love other people. You're freed up to love God more fully than you ever could before. And to me, that's the new heart at work. That's the new heart that's liberated. Just love it so much.
Well, your new book, Dr. Gerry, is Litanies of the Heart. It's available from Sophia Institute Press. You can head on over to their website or your local Catholic bookstore, wherever you buy Catholic books, is where you can get a copy of your book. But you have a lot of different ministries and apostolates. So if people want to learn more about you and the work you're doing, maybe they want to do one of these mental health check ins through your online platform or something, how can they discover you?
Well, you can go to soulsandhearts.com and there access all of our resources, the podcast courses. We have a weekly newsletter that's rich with philosophy, theology, psychology. All you get something every week. So we have that. My own private practice, transfiguration counseling and coaching. We have Catholic therapists and coaches available to help people as well. And we're all IFS informed and trauma informed and take a spiritual approach.
Yeah, so this counseling that you guys offer, is this done online? Is it like an online platform? Because I listen to a lot of secular podcasts. They're always talking about BetterHelp. So are you like the Catholic version of BetterHelp?
I don't know if we're that big, but we have physical presence in Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. But we can also we do have therapists that are licensed in California, New York, and Texas as well that can do online work. And their Catholic coaches can do work nationally and internationally.
Well,
So
that's wonderful. Well, I encourage people to check out your websites, and it will help them to have a more healthy and holy heart as we continue to pursue the heart of Jesus. So thanks so much, Doctor, for joining me today.
my pleasure. Thanks to be nice to be with you.